and welcome to Meet the Author, a program that is brought to you by Quincy Access Television and the Thomas Crane Public Library. During the show, we will highlight authors and their work. Copies of their books are available for checkout at the Thomas Crane Public Library. Also, the library hosts book clubs for all ages, and you can find out more information about them if you visit the library's website, thomascranelibrary.org.
Welcome. You may remember my next guest as the librarian in the children's department of the Thomas Crane Public Library. Well, she is also an author, and she has joined us here today to talk about her newly published book. First, let me welcome Jane Miller. Jane, welcome back to QATV.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always nice. It's nice that you and I can actually sit in the same studio now that COVID, though still around, is dwindling.
Absolutely. I think it's been a rough year for everybody, and especially even the patrons at the library. They're dying to get back in. So
we should mention that early on in the pandemic, you actually read from your book and presented your book to folks virtually. And this was prior to it being published. So first of all, congratulations on The Big Pop. That's the book that we will be talking about today.
Thank you.
And so its start goes back quite a few years. So let's go, since you're a new author, let's kind of go back to the beginnings of this book, the genesis of this book.
Okay. Well, I wrote this book in college. I was a education major at Boston State College, and I did a minor in art education. So Professor Wrigley, who was my professor at that time, knew that I was an exchange student at Mass College of Art. So they had a list of projects and that we were going to do at the end of the year, and everyone had taken one. I think this was the last one left, was to write and illustrate a children's book. So he gave that to me to do. So it was interesting. He added a little more to it. He wanted me to take it out to different schools, elementary schools, to find the findings of what the children thought about the book. So it was very interesting. I took it into Boston, and then I took it to the South Shore, and at that time in 1973 it was very different. A lot of children asked why I didn't have a black balloon, and some of the children in Hingham and Milton asked why didn't I have a white balloon, and I tried to explain to them those were shades, colors, and they weren't really on the spectrum of colors. So
well,
it's interesting.
Let's talk about this book because it works on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm, it does. My idea of it was to have someone, a balloon, because most children love balloons, and that's how I established writing about, was that they are sometimes needing friends, and the importance of having them learn to establish friendship. And children of that age, they sometimes are shy, but once they get to learn to be a friend, as you had mentioned, that it makes a beautiful thing at the end of the story. Also introducing colors with them too.
Obviously, again, the multiple levels. Let's talk first about color, because the book is about when colors get together, when single colors get together, the resulting color that is then seen. That's right. One level.
Right. It starts off with like red balloon. He's a circus balloon, and he's very lonely and wants to find some friends, and he goes through and starts to find something, and in the sky he sees this yellow light, and he says, "Oh, this must be the sun." And as it came closer and closer to him, it was a yellow balloon, and that's the first step of introducing the different colors. So they got to be very friendly and playing around, And as they played together, they would switch and make this third balloon, which was an orange color. So now we have an orange friend in the group. So they, it started off with that. Then the next yellow and red go play together, and they meet two twin balloons, blue balloons. So they come down and they ask, and red and blue balloon came and started playing, and that made a purple balloon. So the illustrations show that the balloons together, but there's two strings together. So it teaches the children that red and blue coming together will make a purple balloon. So, and then yellow and blue coming together will make a green balloon. So it introduces that. And then at the end, all these balloons start to play and dance, and there's a big explosion because they're so excited playing with each other that it made a beautiful rainbow at the end of the story. So,
which is something that we all admire, which is something that we all appreciate, a rainbow. So that's one level. The other level, which we touched upon, is friendship and acceptance.
yes, it's very important that children learn that you know, we have to accept other. Quincy is a very diversified city, and I see it every day in the children's room that, you know, no matter what nationality they are, their friendships, and try to establish friendships, which I think is important to be able to create a feeling with the children of that age and make something that is outstanding.
I think
Yeah.
adults could learn from children.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because children are so accepting.
Absolutely. As a former teacher, I used to see that all the time, you know, and it was, it's a great thing. And, you know, we should, as adults, take that from our children and be more in tune to what they're doing.
So actually, and I'm sure you see this, the rainbow is a diverse community of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that, you know, we can all learn from and cherish the thoughts of being kind and understanding to everybody.
And at the same time, learn about what color with plus another color makes a particular color.
Color.
So talk about publishing now.
Publishing now, I was reading the story. At first, the pandemic happened, and we were not allowed to read different books at first. The publishing rights were very different, and so when Julie Rhines asked me, what can we do? And I said, listen, I have a book, I wrote it, I illustrated it. It was in the library in my office, and I said, I will give you permission to read it. So I read it with my granddaughter, Michaela, and that's how it, we put it on YouTube, and Simon & Schuster called me, and a woman, Megan, she asked me would I be interested in publishing it, and I just I never thought about it. I mean, here it is at my age, I'm publishing a book, but so I talked to them, and they got me ahead and did all the processing. It's a long process to publish a book. You know, people just say, well, you just illustrate it and write it and give it, but there's a lot of steps that are involved in publishing.
Right, you had mentioned that you illustrated it as well.
Yes, I did. I illustrated it.
Multi-talented.
Thank you. Yes, I did. I illustrated it, and at first I wasn't too sure that I would like to put the vintage pictures because over time it had really kind of discolored, but they convinced me to keep it that format. So I said, well, you're the experts, so I will certainly do that.
We should mention that Julie Rhines is the head children's librarian at the Thomas Crane.
She's the coordinating supervisor, yes. Yeah. So.
And talk about, so the publisher got in contact with you
Yes.
as a result of seeing this online?
On YouTube, yes.
Great.
So
There is another potential book in your future?
yeah, well, it's funny. My publicist said, I can see sequels. And I said, well, I've been thinking about it. So I'm taking Red, the red balloon, as the red character. And I'm right now thinking about him going to the zoo. That's one of those things that children love animals. And being a children's librarian, I noticed a lot of books are done with animals and characters. So I thought that would be, so it gives me ideas. He could go to the Frog Pond in Boston. He could travel the world. So there's a lot of options. Go to a birthday party. That would be kind of fun too. So I have a lot of ideas, but I think I'm working on one. So.
As I sit here listening to you and listening to your story, certainly I think it leaves it open for numerous possibilities.
Yes, it does. So.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank you or congratulate you rather, on The Big Pop, a children's book which can really be read again not only by children or to children, but an adult should take a read as well.
Absolutely, they'll learn something from it.
Well,
if not color, diversity.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you for joining me, and
thank you.
Good luck.
For having me.
Hello, my name is Carrie, and I'm one of the librarians here at the Thomas Crane Public Library. I'm happy to be joined today by Caroline Kautsiri, author of the new book, What Kind of Girl? Caroline, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
We're happy to have you. Could you tell me a little bit about your background, how you got started writing? I know you're a local author, but can you tell us where you're from?
Sure. So I'm originally from Malawi, Africa, and I've lived in America for 17 years. I live in Weymouth, Massachusetts, and I'm an English professor at Bunker Hill Community College and Bay State College. So when it comes to my writing, the interesting thing is that when I was in high school, I couldn't write to save my life. And when I moved to America, I developed a huge passion for literature. And that kind of resulted to working on my writing. So that's how I began writing. But if I'm to say serious writing, that's age 27. I was kind of feeling a little lost in life. And I decided to visit Malawi after being away for 7 years. And just being around the people, being around the culture, I started documenting my life. And whether people were welcoming me or alienating me from Malawi, I wrote about it on social media. People said, turn this into a book. So I enrolled at Emerson College and I started writing What Kind of Girl?
Oh, that's great. Well, you just debuted your first title. This is a coming of age novel. Is this your preferred type of genre to write in, or do you like dabbling in all types of literature?
I do dabble in all types of literature, but I will say that nonfiction is something that is powerful to me because I like to write about my perspective as a young Black woman living in America, looking in on America and kind of having this outside perspective. And so I've been writing memoirs and I enjoy poetry as well. I use poetry to articulate things that go unnoticed or things that are usually overlooked. And I advocate for change. I instill hope in people through poetry. So yes, I prefer nonfiction and it kind of trickles into my poetry as well. I want my viewers to know that my book is a conversation starter about how awkward it is to grow up. Like growing up can be very confusing. And I want them to know that having a Malawian life, like an upbringing that takes place in Malawi, can shed light onto other people's coming of age stories, and they can think about their lives and how they turned out as well. Being raised in a culture where I had the British culture, American culture, and the African culture kind of swirling in my head, these things kind of clashed, and I became very confused about things like gender or class or religion, sexuality, and even language itself. So this book kind of doesn't portray Africa as this third world stereotype, but, you know, a real place with real families. Think of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the show, and just imagine that it's an African family.
So my next question for you is, what compels you to write? And do you have any tips for any aspiring authors, especially some of our local aspiring authors?
Sure. I would say I urge writers to find the strength to use their voices in the most purest, honest ways possible. I think there is power in weaving these narratives that help people understand the world better. And I think that there is power in raising awareness about things that go unnoticed. This is why I write. So writers must seize the opportunity to write as a means to impact the world positively. I think we have this responsibility to provide knowledge and to cure ignorance. So let's not take it for granted. Let's create stories and expressions that will deepen our readers' lives with the power of the words that we've chosen. You know, so I would urge everybody to kind of find that strength, you know, to think about what it is they're trying to communicate with the world. We can bring change. We can raise awareness. We can provide knowledge, and you know, it's a powerful thing.
It is. It is. I think that's why so many of us do what we do.
Yes.
The impact of the written word. Well, now to get to know you a little bit outside of your book, who are some of your favorite authors? Who do you admire? What type of style do you try to emulate within your writing? Is there anyone that you've really looked to for inspiration?
Absolutely. I enjoy Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, for their ability to weave stories with words that keep you on your toes. I mean, read their stories. Every line, every sentence is doing something with our imaginations. It's like words doing backflips. And I want to write like that, to move people and to make them think critically and enjoy it at the same time. And I feel like Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison do that for me. I also enjoy the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie, and she's very good at figurative language, representational language. So metaphors, similes, and I feel like she knows how to bring Africa to life because she knows how to liken it to things that are unfamiliar to us, familiar and unfamiliar to us. And I want to do that with Malawi, to make it, you know, a real place for people, and use metaphors that magnify it so much, that amplify what Africa is. And finally, Trevor Noah. I read his book, Born a Crime, when I was trying to finish off my book, What Kind of Girl? And he's got this charm. There's a way that he writes that reminds you of how he does his stand-up comedy. And I wanted to find my style, that I can write in a pure, raw, and honest voice, and people will still recognize my personality. So these are just some of the writers that have influenced my writing for What Kind of Girl, and also in my poetry as well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you too. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eileen Fontenot, and I'm a librarian here at the Thomas Crane Library. And today I'm chatting with Professor David Brown of Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania to discuss his latest book, The Last American Aristocrat, The Brilliant Life and Improbable Education of Henry Adams. So Henry was the last member of our famous family after great-grandfather John Adams and grandfather John Quincy Adams to get national attention. Welcome, David.
It's good to be with you, Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we talk about your book briefly, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, and I did my education out in the Midwest. And when I was in graduate school, I was interested in American intellectual history, social and cultural history. And so that drew me into a number of books and ideas. And that's eventually how I came into contact with Henry Adams, through those books and ideas. For the last 20 some years, I've been teaching at Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania, and I enjoy it. It's a great atmosphere, small classes, opportunity to really get to know and engage with students.
Yeah, I know Henry was a historian as well, right? So you must have connected with him in that way.
He was an historian, and on a couple of levels. He taught for a few years at Harvard, but he didn't really want to be there. And he quit as quickly as he could. He was there for about 7 years. And I think in a more important sense, he wrote a tremendous history of the United States in the early republic. And it's still a classic to this day. And that's his real work, I think, as an historian.
Okay. And that's kind of why you decided to write about him, to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, the family obviously is known as a political family, as it should be. But what attracted me to Henry Adams was, I think, when I first read parts of The Education of Henry Adams for an assignment, actually, when I was in school, and it just drew me in. And he was, I learned an historian, a poet, a novelist. So it was really the literary Henry Adams that drew me into the project.
And I know a lot of our patrons and viewers are curious about the connection Henry has with our town, Quincy. Did he live here often, like a lot, or?
He did. And in fact, Quincy plays a very important role in his thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's the duality between Quincy and Boston. He associated Quincy with his grandfather's family, the famous Adams family, and Boston more so with his mother's family, the Brookses. And that's where the money was at. It wasn't with the Adamses, it was with the Brookses. And so for Henry, Quincy was where he spent his summers ambling about in the orchard of, the famous house, one of the three, I think, Adams houses, I think there's three, that you have in town. And he romanticizes Quincy quite a bit in The Education of Henry Adams as being representative of a kind of simpler and even, better America. And then he negatively contrasts Quincy to Boston. His parents are alive into the 1880s. He, despite living in Washington, D.C., yes, he kept coming back to Quincy.
It's going to be really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about this, because I read a bit about the political Adamses, but not much of Henry. So this is going to be really great, and I'm sure a lot of folks will be interested in this. So
I hope so. Yeah, he's a fascinating man.
Hi, everyone. This is Eileen Fontenot with the Thomas Crane Library, and I'm here today chatting with author James Sullivan, a Quincy native. His new book, Unsinkable, 5 Men in the Indomitable Run of the USS Plunkett. And thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Good. So before we talk about the book briefly, why don't you give us a little of your background and your background as a writer?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Quincy, in several different places in Quincy. I started out right across from the Francis W. Parker School on Billings Road, and then we lived in Squantum, and then up in Merrymount before I went off to college. So I've got a lot of Quincy in the background.
Oh.
The library is up, down, and backwards.
Nice.
So I think when I go back to being a kid, especially in Squantum and going to the library all the time, I think that's probably where my desire to write took root. The Thomas Crane Public Library made so many good books available to the kids. So I always kind of knew that eventually I wanted to write, and I ended up in college and then in graduate school in Iowa, and took it off from there.
Nice. So, sorry, I don't know. Is this what number of book is this? You're not a new author, are you?
No. In fact, I'm sort of. It's only the second book I wrote. I wrote a memoir that was published by Picador in 2004. And then I had two little kids at the time. And as little kids will do, they will get in the way of pretty much any sustained writing that you want to undertake. And so it was only when they were teenagers and didn't need me as much as they used to that I plunged into this new story about my grandfather's brother, John Gallagher.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Was he from Quincy too, or was he from Boston area?
No, the Gallaghers ended up in Quincy eventually in the 50s, but they were from Dorchester. There were 5 Gallagher brothers, and 4 of them went away to war. And one of them, John, was in the Navy. And there was this one story when I was a kid. It was the most famous story across all the branches of my family, really, that John's brother Frank used to tell about having met John right before the invasion of Anzio. John was going in on a Navy ship, a destroyer, the USS Plunkett, and Frank was going in with the infantry as a medic. And they had this reunion, and Frank told the story of that reunion for the rest of his life. And each of us in the family knew it upside down and backwards. And several years ago, I decided to try to embellish the legend of that story with some facts, and Unsinkable is what resulted.
Okay. So you did some historical research as well as kind of blending in that family legend.
I did. It began not as a book even. I was going to Italy with my family on a trip, and I knew that my uncles, great uncles, had a connection to Anzio, and I began to wonder if any of the men who'd been on the ship with my great uncle John Gallagher were still living. And I one day bumped into a man named Jim Feltz, who told me that he had been a very good friend of John Gallagher. And I knew really from that moment that something had its barb in me, and I was going to have to see it through.
Okay. So what did you find that was, very interesting about the story? No spoilers, though.
Well, yeah, sure. I went into it just thinking that I was going to write a little bit of family history. I just wanted to find out. I'd never met him, of course, and I wanted to find out what his experience had been like. And so that's really all I was after in the beginning. But what I found out when I started pulling threads was that the Plunkett, the USS Plunkett, was probably involved in the most harrowing engagement with the German Luftwaffe than any U.S. Navy ship. And they were in on every invasion in North Africa and in Europe. And it culminated, its defining moment happened at Anzio, where there was a 25-minute pitched battle between the Plunkett and 12 to 14 German bombers. And it's that 25 minutes has all of the drama of a blockbuster movie to it. So I didn't know that was the case. I didn't know that's what I would find, but that's what was there at the end of the line.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.